What is up, everybody? This episode of Little Creek Living, I wanted to talk about things that I've learned from my garden. I've been gardening for a really long time, whether it's from my parents' backyard or watching my grandfather grow his beautiful garden and watching my grandmother preserve what grew in the garden. Gardening's always been a part of my life. So when I moved out on my own and got enough land to be able to do that, I expanded as everybody would. I started with a 2x10 garden at my parents' house that I hand dug myself because I wanted to grow hot peppers and tomatoes, and those were the first things I ever grew, and I loved it. If you garden, there is nothing like a tomato right off the vine. That it just, my mouth is watering. I can't wait for summer. There is just something so perfect about slicing a tomato, putting salt and pepper on it, and just eating it. From that, I was on a little hiatus. I went away to college. I obviously wasn't worried about gardening. Then I went to grad school again. I wasn't worried about gardening. And then I moved in with Mike and we built a garden. And I wish I had pictures of it. I might. If I can find pictures, I'll put it in. But Mike built me this beautiful raised bed garden and we fenced it in, and I grew what we could in the small area that we had. Fast forward 3 years, we bought this house. It came with a lot more land, but the soil up here in the mountains is very rocky. It's not necessarily bad soil, just river rock everywhere. So probably when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, this was once a river, this part of the Appalachian Mountains. I started with one raised bed up here and quickly expanded to 4. Now this year, I'm doing a much bigger garden. I just love gardening so much. Gardening teaches you more than just to grow food. It teaches you patience, resilience, and really hard lessons. Last year, my garden was full of success. The yields were amazing. I didn't have any real problems with bugs or pests. Everything we got was used, eaten. My mom pickled my peppers for me, so I'm still eating the yields months later. But it was also full of a lot of challenges. I live in zone 6B, which when I started gardening didn't mean anything to me. I had always lived by what my grandfather had told me, which is don't plant anything before Mother's Day. So I never planted anything before Mother's Day. Now, when I was younger and up until probably 2 years ago, our zone had always been 5A, 5B. I'll double check that. But recently the hardiness zones have changed, and now I'm 6B, which really doesn't change much. I'm still not planting anything in the soil before mid-May. You could get away with cold weather crops like broccoli and some types of lettuce and those types of things. But I really try to be sustainable. I try to be low maintenance. Obviously, I try to be low maintenance because we have other things going on. I have Remy, I have the animals, but I really do love gardening. And this summer, Remy turned 2 and she has been such a help in the garden. First lesson, I planted, and I still do this is the bane of my existence. I plant my plants way too close to one another. I want so many varieties. I want so many different plants. I want so many vegetables. I just don't have the room for it. I had 4 raised beds. I grew my own seeds. So this is the first year that I've ever done this. So I grew like 6 of each thing. and I will show you all the seed packets. I planted, probably 5 different types of hot peppers. I planted mini bell peppers. I planted mini eggplant. I planted micro tomatoes. I do not recommend, that is one of the lessons that I learned, and we'll get to that. But I planted everything so close together because I wanted so much yield, and really it just stunted some mini bell peppers. I probably got like 2 because the micro tomatoes took over that whole raised bed, and I'll show you a picture of it. So the other things that I put in that bed did not grow at all. For a beginner gardener, spacing is very important, and when I planted my garden in the beginning, I would measure the 18 inches, the 2 feet, the 6, I would measure in between plants. Now I feel like I've been doing it for so long, I kind of know how big plants are going to get, and I do it based off my experience. But if you're a beginner, you need whatever that tag says. You could probably get away with an inch or 2, but until you really learn what that plant does and what you want your yield to look like, just listen to the directions. Because somebody out there, whoever is selling those seeds, I get mine from Johnny's, they do experiments all year long about what growing conditions are the best for these plants. So someone out there does a lot of work to figure out how you're going to get the best yields, the best tasting vegetable, whatever you're growing. Please, please, please do not overcrowd your plants. Do not do what I did, because I grew all these from seeds and I wasted probably about 8 plants, maybe 10. I got a little greedy. I wanted too much from my garden. Second lesson is ignoring soil health. I created my soil. I layered my soil. Every year I put new manure in it, but this is something that I had to learn. Soil health is very important because that's where your plants get the nutrients, and if you don't have good soil health, you have low yields, you'll get pests because your plants just aren't healthy, so it won't attract beneficial pests. So soil health is super important, and it also, like, just think about the soil is what your food is eating. So you want your food to get the best type of food. Don't overlook that. I have overlooked that. I'm better at it now. I don't do soil testing. Mine's not directly in the ground. It's in a raised bed. So I can control what goes in and what comes out of that a lot better than I can if it were straight in the ground. If I were to have problems with any of my crops or my plants or pests or anything, I would definitely look into soil health, but since I don't have a ton of that right now, my third lesson is planning for wildlife. When we lived in our old house, we lived in town, but there were tons, I mean tons of deer. We had fawn bed in our backyard. Our neighbor had a groundhog under his shed, rabbits, we still had wildlife even though we lived in town. When we first did the raised bed in our old house, we did not put any fencing around it because I never had a problem with wildlife before. Until one morning I came out and 4 heads of lettuce were completely gone. We put a fence up after that. It was just T-posts and some garden fencing. It was very inexpensive. We didn't even really have a door on it. It was just, we overlapped the fencing to the other T-posts and I just went in and out of it. Here we have a big fenced in yard and my garden is within the yard. Right now, knock on wood, I don't have any problem. Also, we have a dog now who doesn't let any wildlife into our yard. Invest in a fence or a dog. If Luna sees something in the yard, she will chase it out of the yard. Maybe that's why I don't need fencing. So it's just something that I look out for. Pests, my basil got overrun this year by Japanese beetles. I use neem oil. I know other people use other things. I really didn't even get any basil this year because it was so overrun by Japanese beetles that I didn't even want to use it. It was like every single leaf leaf had like a bite out of it. And I grew a lot of basil because I like making homemade pesto. Things that I do differently is I'm going to, and this is my fourth lesson, I didn't companion plant. Companion planting is beneficial for so many reasons. The reason that I want to companion plant is works as pest control. I did plant marigolds in the garden. We had a problem with aphids, so I did plant a lot of marigolds. Got suffocated by my micro tomato. So it just repels some of the harmful pests. If you really look into what plants do good together, tomato and basil go great in food and they go great in the garden. So it's kind of like they're soulmates, they're meant to be. So improves the plant health. Also companion planting, I'm going to do this year because there are plants that like shade. Growing crops over it. I'm also going to be doing a trellis this year, which I'll show you when we get to how I'm going to make it. Grew watermelon this year and it took over an entire bed because I didn't trellis it. Lesson learned. I'm doing that differently. Okay, you'll notice that I have a different shirt on. Yesterday was another day. We're talking about companion planting. The reason why I've never done it before is just because I didn't have any knowledge about it. I didn't even know that that was a thing. I didn't even know to research it. Hard to ask questions about things that you don't know. You know, being a lifelong learner and always wanting to do better in my garden. This year, as I mentioned before, I did plant marigolds and that helped a lot with the aphid. It's called companion planting for a reason. Things like to be together. You can look all this stuff up. It just creates a better ecosystem for your plants and it's something I had no idea about. And the last lesson, which is probably my hardest, is time management. It is so easy in the beginning to bite off more than you can chew in the garden because the plants are small, you have big dreams, and you don't know what else is going to come up in the summer, and a lot of things come up in the summer, and you have these great, beautiful, successful plants, and you're just running around all summer and you have no time to cook them, you have no time to preserve them, so you're just handing out tons of food to other people that was originally supposed to be for your family. What I'm going to implement this year, I already went through my seed book and wrote down everything that we already use, everything that we already eat. Remy and I eat tons of tomatoes. So if I have a lot of tomatoes, that's not really that big of a deal because I know our family will eat them. I also like to experiment in the garden with at least 1 or 2 new plants every year. I did ground cherries last year, which, spoiler alert, you have to pick them off the ground. They are delicious. I gave most of them to the chickens because, again, I didn't know what to do with them. That was my first time ever growing them. I hear a lot of people like to eat ground cherry pie. Really didn't want to tackle that, so the chickens got some good treats this summer. Remy's much more independent, so I'm able to spend more time out in the garden, and we'll see when we get to the summer, but hopefully she understands that, like, let's not eat it all. Okay, so my vision, my idea for my 2025 garden is pretty lofty. I want to get rid of the raised beds or maybe just use them in a different way. But there is a whole stretch of land on our fence that's up to our neighbors, which is a neighbor that we like. So if they pick produce off whatever, it's not going to bother us. I would love to turn that into a garden. We need to do a lot of work over there to make it a garden. And if I don't get there, that's okay. So this year, also in my garden, I'm gonna have Remy plant seeds with me. It was my first year doing it, so now I can teach her. She could be a part of the process. I'm very excited. As I've mentioned before, passing on these skills, these homesteading skills, it enriches our lives. These types of skills, I want to pass them on to Remy. These were some memories from my childhood that have stuck with me forever. Being in the garden with grandparents and just seeing what my grandmother did with what came out of that garden, it was magical. And I want to create that for my family. So I think what it boils down to is my vision for my 2025 garden is just creating sustainability, self-sufficiency, and memories. I get a sense of, I don't even know, a sense of warmth, a sense of of connection when I open a jar of peppers that my mom pickled me from my garden, from my jalapenos, from my cherry peppers, from my Chinese 5 colors. I grew that and my mom canned them, and now I get to eat them in the dead of winter. I'm always sad when gardening season is over. I'm always sad when I pull those last plants out and throw them over for the chickens to pick off. I'm always sad when the garden bed is empty, and this is just a way to get me through the winter when I know that, oh, I grew that and now I'm eating it for breakfast. You know, just to recap, I think biggest lessons for my garden are overcrowding plants, soil health, learning about wildlife in my area and pests, not companion planting, and time management. So those are the 5 things that I feel like if you pick one of these things and learn it really good, you'll have successful gardening. If you're just starting out, I would really recommend soil health, because a lot of things will appear in your plants that you're not sure what it is, and you'll think it's too much water. If you're a new gardener and you see a discoloration on your leaves, at least I did, I always thought, oh, it's thirsty, let's just give it more water. And then I'd kill a plant. It really wasn't that it needed more water, it just the soil health wasn't the best, or it had blight from being overcrowded, or blight can also get in the soil, but that's for another video. Pick one of these 5 things and really learn about it. Let me know in the comments down below if you've struggled with any of these things. I know I'm not the only one. Where are my other anxious moms with the time management, or my procrastinators? Come on. So if anybody has any tips for how to successfully expand a garden without it being overwhelming, or like what I should be looking out for, that would be really helpful. Thanks for being part of Little Creek Living, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.